So AANM, which is putting on this talk, is located on Treaty 1 territory and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Anisininyu, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Red River Métis Nation. We note that Treaty 3 is where Winnipeg receives its water supply, and that most of our electricity is taken from Treaty 5. We aim to move forward in solidarity with Indigenous people to address the continued harm perpetrated by colonialism. Disability justice must take into account experiences of ableism that intersect with racism, sexism, ageism, sizeism, queer and transphobia, settler colonialism, and white supremacy. We try to learn from systems of oppression and movements of resistance and how they implicate us. We believe all people have a right to participate in, inform, and lead arts and culture. Okay, I'm just going to check to see if there's anyone else in the waiting room. Looks like we're all good. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a quick little intro of Debbie, and then I'm gonna hand it off to her. Debbie Patterson is a Winnipeg playwright, director, and actor. Trained at the National Theatre School of Canada, she is a founding member of Shakespeare in the Ruins, served as theatre ambassador for Winnipeg's Cultural Capital Year, was the Carol Shields Writer in Residence 2012 at the U of W, and playwright in residence at Theatre Projects Manitoba. In 2013-14, she served as artistic associate at Prairie Theatre Exchange from 2012 to 2018 and is currently a member of the PTA Playwrights Union. She is a proud advocate for disability arts through her work as founding artistic director of Sick and Twisted Theatre. She lives a wheelchair-enabled life in Winnipeg and in a cabin on the shore of Lake Winnipeg. So Debbie, take it away.
Thanks, Sasha. Yeah, thanks so much for dropping in for this. It's a real honor to speak to you about my work. So I want to talk first about how my practice has been transformed by disability. So for the first part of my professional life, I wasn't disabled. I had the privilege of going to theater school, which I would not have had I been in this body that I am now. When I was 19 and went to theater school, I and I probably wouldn't have been a founder of Shakespeare in the Ruins either. And it might not even exist if I wasn't working, because there were like a little sort of core group of us that started it, that had the idea. And we might not have been in that place had I not been there. So that's, yeah, funny. I'd never thought of it that way. So but in my all my training as a theater artist was very physical, very physically based. Um, we had movement classes every day. We had dance classes. We had karate. We had stage fighting, fencing, um, ballet dancing, like all of it. Very physical. Even our vocal training was very physically based. So I had very ableist views about how theater is made and what needs to happen for theater to happen. What skills you need to have in order to be a performer. So then when my body started changing, I thought I had to give up performing because the body I had didn't fit into what I thought theater was. And I also didn't know any other disabled theater artists at the time. I didn't think it could be done, that if you were a performer, an actor, you had to be as versatile as possible physically in order to do the job. You had to embody so many different characters that you needed your body to be responsive to your will. And if it wasn't, then and if you weren't keeping up your training and keeping your body limber and in good shape and flexible and strong, then you couldn't do this work. So I stopped. I stopped auditioning. I stopped performing, and I really missed it. And I developed more as a playwright and director because those are things you can do without your body being involved. Without requiring your body to be completely available to you. Um, and did that for a while, but I really missed performing. So I started to look for ways that I could continue to perform and work around my physical disability. So I did this show called Sergeant and Victor, where I did a bunch of interviews with people who lived or worked near the corner of Sargent Avenue and Victor Street, and then I uh, took those interviews and composed a series of monologues, kind of in chronological order. So people who had memories of living there as kids, and people all the way to people who live there now. Um, and then I performed it. Um, but I entered in the dark with my cane. I sat down in a chair, tucked my cane under the chair so it wouldn't be seen, did the whole show in the chair, did the curtain call in the chair, and then in the dark walked out with my cane. And I don't know who I thought I was fooling, but that's what I thought I could, I thought I was getting away with something. Um, and then and then I was moving further in the development of this play, Sergeant and Victor, and it was really about the neighborhood and how much the neighborhood has changed over the last 50 years. That it used to be this really great community, family-friendly neighborhood where great place to raise your kids and a lot of um, single family dwellings, right? Owned by the like with the homeowners living in their houses. And now most of those houses are split up into rentals and they're owned by people who aren't invested in the neighborhood. And it's become more dangerous to live there. And so I was curious about how the neighborhood had changed and what had made the change happen. And I wanted to work with this dramaturge, Iris Turcott. So I sent her my script. I sent her the video of me performing it. And she called me up and she said, "What's wrong with you?" And and I was kind of taken aback, but I told her, well, I have MS and it's this progressive condition and my body is changing and over the next few years it's going to continue to change. And she said, "Dummy, what's happening to your body is what's happening to that neighborhood. You have to write about what's going on to your body with your body." And other people had been saying you should be writing about what's going on, writing about your experience of this. And I was really resistant to it. I was really like, no one wants to see the play about me and my disease. Like that's boring. But but when Iris put it that way, I could see it. I could see it as a way to explore this neighborhood, as a way to explore the idea of what was going on. And so I changed the play and it became Sergeant and Victor and Me. And it became a play about how we live within unstoppable processes of destruction and and how we find value, purpose, and meaning within um, within a slow decline to chaos. Um, and so it became about much more than that neighborhood. It became about much more than me and my disease. It became about something that we all live with, living in a time of climate crisis. It's something we're all living through. So it 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 became universal is a tricky word, but in a way universal, that there was something at the core of what I was experiencing that was relevant and resonant with everybody who came to see it. So it was only by embracing my disability rather than trying to work around it, but embracing it and saying, what is here? What can I learn from this experience? What can I share of what I've learned, and what can I find that is of value to others through this experience that that transformed the way I make art, really. Um, and it felt like the story that I'm living with through living with MS is a story that needs to be told. Um, and it's a story that's particularly um, well told in a live performance setting where the artist is the artist is the art. In live performance, as a performer, your body is the art. People come to see your art and they're looking at your body. you know so there's no escaping it. There's no like it just is. It's just relevant. It's you. It's you and your abilities. um theater happens in the body when an actor is performing. I'm directing this show. I directed this show that's playing right now. It's called Hansel and Gretel in Portage Place. It's just a silly panto, but there's this one actor who is so embodied. It's just lovely working with her. When she feels something, she feels it with her whole body. You can see her whole body respond to her thoughts. Theater is just like you see actors transform physically because of what they're thinking, because of like just because of the text that they're working with and the way. the way it changes their body, the way it changes their thinking, happens in your body. And we watch it happen in the body of the actor. That's the story is happening in their body. It's fascinating. And it happens in the bodies of the audience because we all have to be in a shared space. We all have to be in a room together. So when an actor on stage speaks, they're using their body to vibrate the air. And those vibrations travel through the room and vibrate the bodies of the audience. I mean, it's such an intimate thing. And we're physically connected in theater. We're physically connected in this act of storytelling. And every body tells a story. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what your body looks like. Any body that steps on stage is telling a story already, just because of the way you move, the way you look, the color of your skin, your age, your size, your gender. Your body is telling a story about who you are, about who the world you inhabit. Your body is telling a story, no matter whether you want it to or not. And you can alter what story your body tells based on what you wear or how you carry yourself or, what you, but whatever, there's so many choices you can make that affect the story you're telling. But whether you want it to or not, your body is already telling a story. So it's very, yeah, theater is so embodied, and so it's the perfect place to explore uh, this transformation into disability and this disability narrative. And there's so many benefits of disability aesthetics that happen within theater. I have a colleague, Alex Bomer, who's blind, and she describes blindness as living in a state of limitless possibility because she feels that when she walks into a space, she doesn't know where the walls are. She doesn't know where the room ends. It could be infinite. This is limitless. The space she's in is there are limitless possibilities of what could be happening in that space because she doesn't have to define it right away. She gets to live in the unknowing for a little bit longer than most of us. And in that place, everything is possible. We're so I Google kills our imaginations. We don't get to we don't get to wonder if we can when we can find answers, we can look something up, everything. We can look it up and find the answer. We don't get to wonder anymore. We don't get to live in ignorance. Live in that moment of like everything being undefined. And it's such a precious space. So that yeah, and it's a generative space for imagination. So for Alex, living with blindness is an augmentation of her practice as an artist. As a performer, I find the disruptions of disability always provide opportunities. Um, I took a clown class back in my biped days. I took this clown class, and clown is so fun. Um, this the clowns have to be completely honest. It doesn't. If you can't get away with any bullshit, any artifice in clowning. You really you have to be honest. So if the floor squeaks and you ignore it and pretend the floor didn't squeak, then you break it. Like and the audience knows you're not telling the truth, right? And so when the floor squeaks in this particular clown was teaching this clown class, he's he believes that the floor squeaking is a gift from the gods. Like suddenly there's this thing going on that you have no control over, that is changing the moment for you, and it gives you something to play with, and it will throw off what you plan to do. It will be a big disruption in what you were planning to do in your performance, the squeaking floor, but it's it's a gift. It's an opportunity to try something new, to explore something, to tell the truth. So disruptions are opportunities. It's also like like once the conventional way of doing something is no longer available, every other possibility suddenly becomes available. Like if you can't walk across the room, If you can walk across the room, that's what you're going to do. You're just going to walk across the room. But if you can't walk across the room, then you can lie down and roll. You can crawl. You can shoosh on your bum. You can be carried. You can move in a wheelchair. You can roll, sit on a skateboard and roll across the room. Like there's so many other possibilities that you would never even think of. You would never even try. The possibilities of getting from one side of the room to the other are locked in to walking, and that's what you can do. When you can't do that, every other possibility is suddenly on the table. So it is a very generative place for artistic creation, for just, for shaping a narrative around movement. There's suddenly so many more possibilities available to you to tell the story. Disability also, for me, strips away artifice. Kind of like the clown, that like you can't pretend. You can't pretend to be something you're not. You can't dress it up. It is what it is. And it's truthful. It's honest. You can't fake it. And if you can, you will. You can. But disability doesn't let you do it. It strips away the artifice and puts you in a place of kind of radical truth telling. And and theater is ultimately a storytelling medium. And stories are super important. Um, Stories shape our beliefs, and beliefs guide our actions. And we are hungry. We humans are hungry for story. We love story. We find story even when there isn't story. We look for story anywhere we can. I was just rewatching the last little bit of Everything Everywhere All at Once, and there's this scene near the end. I don't know if you saw it or you remember it, where there are these two rocks that are just sitting on the edge of a cliff, and there's like this long sequence where there's just these two rocks sitting there, and then there's a single shot of one rock, and then a single shot of the other rock, like like you would shoot a scene where there's a two shot of two people having a conversation, and then there's a single shot of one person because they're talking, and a single shot of the other person, and you just like it's stupid because it's just rocks, these two rocks on a cliff, but you create a narrative as you watch it. You create a narrative of the conversation happening between these two rocks because that's what we do. We long for narrative, and narrative changes us. There's this amazing thing called the ACE study. It's ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Events, and it's a medical study. So there's this questionnaire of adverse childhood events, and you can fill it in and you get a score, and then the score is a fairly accurate predictor of your health throughout your life, um, in terms of heart health, uh, cancer, like things that you wouldn't think would be associated with adverse childhood events are predicted by this questionnaire. And one of the things that has been proven to sort of counteract adverse childhood events and improve the health, even if you got your health, even if you have a very high score of adverse childhood events. One of the things that's been proven to improve that is telling your general practitioner the story of your adverse childhood event. So not going for counseling about it, not seeking, going to a psychologist or psychiatrist, just telling your general practitioner the story of your adverse childhood event improves your health outcomes throughout your life, which is ridiculous, right? Because nothing goes on. There's no therapy that's prescribed because of this. There's no, um, nothing changes except that you've told this story. And somehow telling this story to your GP changes your health outcome. There's also this dignity therapy, which is used in palliative cases, where where through this therapy, a person who is dying shares their life story with someone who is there to write their story for them. So a dying person shares their life story. The uh, I guess scribe uh, records it, writes it down, edits it, puts it all, puts it all in order, and then reads it back to the person, some days later, reads it back to the person who is dying. And it improves the quality of life through your last days. It reduces anxiety, it reduces pain. It vastly improves the quality of life. Simply telling your story, knowing it's written down, knowing you can hear it played, hearing it played, told back to you, changes your body, changes your physiological response to dying, which is, I think, remarkable. The power of narrative is unbelievable. Um, and then there's this other story where there's this young woman that I interviewed as part of Sergeant and Victor and Me, and I interviewed her with her child protection worker, and she was in custody when I interviewed her, and she when I first told her I wanted to interview her and why, for this project, she was very because I didn't want to do something extractive, right? I didn't want to just go in, grab her story, and go away. I wanted to begin a relationship. Um, and so but she challenged me right off the hop. She was like, you just want to hear from me because I'm a gang member? That's what you see when you look at me? That's all I am. And so I talked to her about why I wanted to hear her story. And I offered that it was an opportunity to speak without being judged, that anything she said wouldn't be, used against her. It would never come back to bite her. There would be no consequences to sharing things. And anything that she didn't want me to share, I wouldn't share. I gave her like I have a process when I do verbatim work where I make sure that the person I interview is consenting to the material before it's used. So I share a draft with people I interview so that they can, veto anything that I've written, anything they said. If they don't want it repeated, I take it out. Um, so I made sure she knew that that she would have that opportunity. That was part of our agreement, and she was able to just like I don't think she had that opportunity to just speak about her life without being judged, without without time limits. I was like, I'll come back as many times as you want. I'll stay here as long as you want. Like we're just here. Like, you know, it's yours. Like the ball's in your court, right? And and after that session, she asked her child protection worker to help her get in touch with the foster mom who raised her until she was 5 years old. Someone she had been trying to get in touch with, for ever since she had gone back into care. Um, and she was about 15 at the time I talked to her. And and it took a while, but she did get in touch with this mom and stopped, got out of the gang and went to live with her foster mom again. And when she was an adult, um, and like she changed her life. And I really believe it was just having the opportunity to speak without being judged. Just speak story. We have to tell our stories. Our stories are so powerful. Um, and so stories about disability are are in our culture hard to find authentic versions of stories about disability. Most are written by non-disabled people for non-disabled people, and cast us as either victims or heroes. And we all know that's not the case. That's not an accurate representation of disability at all. So after um, developing Sergeant and Victor in me, I felt really galvanized to uh, support the storytelling of other disabled creators. So I started Sick and Twisted Theater, and the goal was to help other people with disabilities uh, engage in theater, knowing that uh, I would not have been trained or experienced as a theater artist if I had started out disabled. That I knew I feel really privileged, that I have a sort of a training and a body of work behind me as a disabled person. It's not easy to do. So so I felt like I had a responsibility to create opportunities for other disabled people who would want to enter into professional theater, want to develop as professional theater artists because their opportunities are so limited. So I started Sick and Twisted. And one of the first things we did was a cabaret called Lame Is. Lame Is. Lame Is. So we were redefining disability. Lame is dot dot dot. Um, and 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 so I put out a call for submissions, and a bunch of people applied, and we all got together and had our first meeting to talk about how we were going to make this cabaret. And I asked people to sort of propose an idea of a thing they wanted to do, a little show they wanted to make, like a 5 to 15 minute piece that they wanted to share that had something to do with their disability. Um, and then I gave them rules that they had to adhere to. That the first rule was this isn't a PSA, so you're not here to raise awareness about whatever it is whatever your disability is. Like I'm not, we don't need a PSA about multiple sclerosis. There are lots of places where people can find out what multiple sclerosis is. That their awareness can be raised in other places. This is art. This isn't the PSA. My other rule was you're not here to complain about how hard it is to be disabled, because you're here to explore your disability for the benefit of the audience. So you need to be the audience doesn't benefit from hearing you complain about how hard your life is with a disability. The audience benefits from hearing you speak deeply about your experience of disability and and to sort of mine to go down deep, deep, deep into what it is to be disabled, what it is on a sort of a psychic level, right? What how does disability change who you are, change your place in the world, change your relationships with others? How does it how does it y- how does it change who you believe yourself to be? And I also, my third rule was that it's not enough to simply express yourself. You need to be thinking about the audience. They're the ones who are, leaving home, going through the cold, snowy streets of Winnipeg to go to a theater to hear you. So what are you giving them? What are you offering them that they need? So that was kind of the beginning of how we were going to work together. And then I pulled together some other people who were either had a lived or shared experience of disability to act as and who had some professional theater background to act as mentors to all of these artists so that we could help them develop their piece, develop themselves as artists. So just learning to think like an artist, to question, to vision, to to yeah, to like you know engage in that artistic practice of asking yourself hard questions and uh, and trying to find answers to them. Uh, so that was part of it, and to also support people in what comes next, right? Like how do you write a grant, and where if you create a piece for this show and you think there's a possibility for it to have a further life, how are we going to do that? How can we develop that further? So that was all part of the mentorship that was involved in that first show. And and what we did was we challenged the audience's assumptions. It was really interesting. After the first that first cabaret, a number of people were were quite surprised by what they had seen, you know? Someone said to me, I don't know what I was expecting to see, but it definitely wasn't that. You know? And and I think people came uh, with the assumption that they were going to see the end of some sort of uh, recreational sort of uh, therapeutic recreation process for people with disabilities. You know, that it wasn't that they weren't going to see a professional artistic practice on stage. They were going to see people with disabilities having a good time and doing a little doing some skits, you know, and and it was challenged their assumptions because that they set the bar low because they had no idea that disabled creators could think on that scale, could create on this scale, could have something they needed, you know, that we had that we had something they needed. So it was a real challenge to the status quo to share that work. Um, I want to share a little piece of writing that I did. So during the pandemic, um, uh, things got a lot better for a lot of folks with disabilities because we were meeting this way through Zoom, and it makes everything a lot more accessible for many of us. Um, so I started collaborating with people all across the country during the panini because I it was just so easy. Um, and and one of my colleagues in Toronto uh, just approached me and said, "Is there, you know, what does this?" I think he saw something that I'd created for Manitoba Theatre Center. They were doing these uh, online magazines, and I created this series. I think they were called Disability Dispatches, where I just talked about my experience of the pandemic from a disability perspective, and and sort of offered encouragement to people who didn't have this perspective, who weren't used to, you know, living with limitation, who felt all hard done by because they didn't get to do what they want. You know? And I kind of felt like, you know, like that's one of my superpowers. You know, I can not get what I want and still be really happy about it, you know? Like I learn more when I don't get what I want. So when I don't get what I want, that's good too, you know? So so I felt like the pandemic was a really great opportunity to explore that, you know, and so he reached out to me and said, can we can we work on something? He said, I have this idea. I want to write a code for living, like the Bushido code, but but from a disability perspective during the pandemic. And so I wrote this set of agreements, call them the agreements, and then and with this project is dragging on, but we're still working on it. From the agreements, then I wrote a series of lyrics for each of the agreements, and now we're working with a composer who's composing music for each of those agreements. So we're creating a song cycle of art songs, and then eventually it's going to be an online game, like an interactive game. I don't know how this is going to work, but I wrote this series of agreements that I thought I would share with you today. So, and these, I just think these are so disability perspective. So agreement number one, your body is the earth. This is not a metaphor, it's a fact. Remember what you're made of. Agreement number two, there is no such thing as individual achievement. We all succeed or fail based on the strength of our connection to others. Agreement number three, unearned profit is the theft of other people's time. Hold only what is rightfully yours. Agreement number four, cultivate curiosity, especially about other people. Assume you know nothing of their story. Let kindness and curiosity flow from unknowing. Agreement number five, choose to grow in ways that nurture rather than consume. Resist the urge to reach for more in everything but your own imagination. Agreement number 6. Sharing will make you happier than hoarding. Let go. Agreement number 7. When you benefit from an unjust system, you compromise your integrity, self-respect, and capacity for wisdom. Use your privilege in the service of justice. Agreement number 8. Your vulnerability is as important as your strength in building a web of interdependence. Ask for help as easily as you offer it. And then the last agreement, number 9, is remember you will die and the story will carry on without you. So yeah, we're making those into a series of songs. And then a video game? I'm not sure, but that's what we're doing. So I really think I couldn't have found those without my lived experience of disability. I really don't think I would have arrived at those ideas, those agreements without it. Certainly, certainly the expression of vulnerability being as important as strength. And certainly during the pandemic really brought that out as well, there were so many sort of societies for mutual aid, right? That kind of sprung up during the pandemic and and built these webs of community. And those webs of community could not be built without people asking for help. It is asking for help that creates community. And we all need community to thrive. And if nobody is asking for help, if we're all pretending we're fine and we're strong and we don't need anybody because we're told that being strong is good and being weak is bad, but it's not true. Being weak is really important. It's really powerful. And being strong is sometimes bullshit, sometimes boring. So, so yeah, I would never have found these without disability or curiosity. That's another idea that disability has given me because I have MS, it's progressive, right? So it continues to evolve. My body continues to change. And I know that it's going to change, that new things are going to happen, that more limitations will happen, and they're going to change who I am. And and it's and the only thing I have found that can stand in the face of that fear of of unstoppable destruction is curiosity to ask who will I become, what happens when I require care, you know who will I be, how will that change who I am, how will my experience of the world change, how will my relationships transform, what new things will I discover about the world, about relationships, about the nature of love when I require care, right? Like there's so many things that I don't know, that I will never know until I get there. And so curiosity for me is the thing that keeps me, it's the antidote to grief for me. Yeah. And the idea of there's no such thing as individual achievement. So many people pretend that they're one man against the world, right? And it's not true. We all need each other. And there is no such thing as individual achievement. If you achieve something, it's because other people were there before you, making it, building the road for you to travel down. Yeah. So so it's so important for us to tell our stories and to use our lived experience to find those stories. And so which brings me to my card, which calls What's at Stake? So, what's at stake here? So I was at a conference. I was moderating a panel at the Playwrights Guild. I had a conference a couple of months ago in Toronto, and I was moderating a panel on adaptations. All the all the other playwrights on stage had adapted other works, other people's writing into plays. And one of the panelists, Emile Scheer, had adapted a book called The Boy on the Moon. The Boy on the Moon? It's Ian Brown's book about his son Walker, who is severely disabled, nonverbal. And so he wrote this book about being the dad of a very disabled kid and his experience of that. And then Emile Scheer wrote this play about it. And who boy do I have some issues with Ian Brown's attitudes toward disability. And and you know and in this play as well. And Emile is disabled. And so he was talking about this book or this adaptation, and he talked about because he interviewed uh, Walker's mom as well, and Walker's mom said in this interview that she hoped that Walker died before she did, and Emile thought this was a great uh, a great sacrifice, you know, that like a great evidence of maternal love and sacrifice that she would want her child to die before she did. Um, which I, obviously took exception to. Um, and then he went on to talk about having written a play about Tracy Latimer's father, and I was quite, quite taken aback that he was talking quite freely about um, parents of disabled children killing or wishing their children dead in front of me. I thought I was shocked that he thought this was acceptable. Um, And then he also talked about adapting Hannah's Suitcase, which is a Holocaust story, and I think he didn't know about the connection between disabled children, the murder of disabled children, and the Holocaust. That that technology was developed, the gas chamber technology was developed on disabled children, um, and it just like so these like when we're not telling our stories, these are the kind of fucking stories that are out there. You know, I mean, these are the stories that people are telling about disability in our art form. These are the stories they're telling. And they, not recognizing that when we presume to decide whose life is worth living and whose isn't, we open the door to all manner of fascism. You know, we like it's appalling to me that these are the stories of disability in the world. We need we need to be telling our own stories. Which which is why we did when we came out of the pandemic, our first show, our first cabaret was called Useless Eaters, which was the name of a Nazi propaganda campaign against disabled people, uh, calling disabled people useless eaters, people who consume but are unable to produce. Um, and that's what we wanted to discuss, because through the pandemic there was that right near as we were just coming out of the lockdown, the idea that people with pre-existing conditions, well, they might get sick and die, but we're calling the herd or something like as if anybody is disposable, right? Um, so we wanted to address that sort of sentiment that we were seeing in the world, and this brings me to the idea that ableism hurts us all. So you don't have to be disabled to be hurt by ableism, because ableism is a form of control it is exerted on the entire population. That capitalism reduces us into wealth generating units as people that we need to produce in order to be of value in the world. And that it is such an internalized idea that most of the world labors under this myth, under this belief, and they and don't even know that they're making the assumptions they're making. This is why our voices are so important, that we need to be we need to be the ones addressing that. We need to be reminding people that we have inherent value. We don't need to produce. Our bodies are the earth. It's not a metaphor, it's a fact. We are nature, right? We can look at a mountain and appreciate it for its beauty. It doesn't have to do anything for us. It doesn't have to have gold that we can mine. It's just beautiful because it is. We can look at a lake. We don't need to be able to water ski on it or fish on it. We can just admire the lake. The lake is beautiful. The lake has value just because it is. And our bodies are the same. We have value. We are beautiful just because we are, not for any kind of resource extraction possibilities that exist for our labor. We have value just as we are, because we are the earth. We are part of it and we have value. Ableism makes us fearful and ashamed of our human messiness, of our vulnerabilities. But it's that very messiness that makes us human. And so how if we try to hide our messiness, we're hiding our humanity. We're hiding what makes us special and unique and beautiful. So much it's so interesting. I was at a early on in my sort of transition into identifying as a and feeling like I could practice disability aesthetics. I went to this conference of disabled theater artists, and I didn't know there were others, but there were disabled theater artists in Ottawa. And there was this panel where someone who was disabled from birth asked us as performers, "Do you feel like you're on display when you're on stage?" And I actually feel less like I'm on display now than before I became disabled. Because as a woman on stage, you're judged for so many for you're judged for your appearance so much more harshly than your male colleagues. Because there's an expectation. And certainly, you know, in the 90s in theater, there was a, a a beauty expectation on stage. I think it's changing now. You know, the standards of like you would never see a not skinny person on stage in the 90s, you know? Like it just didn't happen. And it's changing now. Um, but that idea of being on display is not a thing I experience anymore because I'm no longer, you know, there's no longer it's Mary Walsh said this in an interview. She said, if you're pretty or trying to be pretty, that's all you can be. But if you're not pretty, you get to be everything else, right? And so as soon as you're not as soon as you're not the thing, you know, the look, as soon as that's not a possibility, then you can just like dispense with it and just be who you are. There's no need for the artifice. This is the artifice that disability strips away, right? You can just be who you are. And so I feel much less on display as a disabled person because all that fear and shame of my human messiness is no longer something a delusion I labor under. You know, I'm quite messy and I'm quite human and I'm fine with it. I don't have shame about it anymore. And but all our, you know, all those tabs, all our non-disabled citizens that come to see our work, they're laboring under these illusions that their human messiness is a weakness, that they need to hide that they need to be ashamed of it. And they need us to help them through that, you know, to shake off that bullshit. So that's all of that, all that fearful shame of human messiness gets in the way. And denying the messiness denies our humanity. People are driven to ridiculous lengths to overcome or conceal any sign of imperfection, you know, the plastic surgery or dieting or over, you know, uh, uh, being addicted to the gym, like all these things that we do, coloring our hair just to hide the fact that we're getting old, to, you know, disguise. And yeah, we want to be beautiful and we want to look good and we want to feel good about ourselves, and that's all great. But there's a limit, right? There's a line where it becomes like unhealthy. And so many of our non-disabled relatives, friends, audiences, family members are laboring under these illusions that they need to be presenting some kind of perfection. And all of these things prevent us from knowing ourselves, who we really are. You know, this the 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 belief that we need to produce, the belief that we need to hide our messiness, the belief that we need to do everything we can to look young and fit and gorgeous and able and healthy. Uh, all of these things stand in the way of us knowing who we really are. There was this, I can't remember his name. There was a record producer who talked about working with the Blind Boys of Alabama. And he, he, in this interview I heard him on the radio, he said, they introduced me to parts of myself that I didn't know I was looking for, just working with these people with disabilities. So as artists with disabilities, this is the nut. Here it is. we they need us. The people need us. You know, we need to see each other's work because we need to understand more about other disabilities. We need to we need to see, like, we need it. We there's so little access to work created by other disabled artists, to other disabled brains. We need access to it so we can understand our own journey with disability, our own exploration of disability. But even more than that, the people need us, the citizens need it. They need to see our art because we're the ones who are able to dig deep and find the universal, find the truth, find the commonality that we can share with others to help them understand who they are. We're all living through this in this sort of struggle between the animals that we are, animals with the apprehension of gods, right? That's what we are. So we're in this space in between, and we need the people need our help. It's a struggle to reconcile being animals, the animals that we are, with the knowledge that we have of the divine, of the beyond, of the intellect. Like, and we're the ones who can explore that. I like to think of it as compost, that the experiences of our lives, difficult experiences of our lives, the ableism we face, the trauma we face as a result of living in an ableist society, uh, is like compost. And we can take that and we can put it into place. We turn it over, we let it age, we let it mellow, and after a little while, it will give us something that we can use that will nurture the growth of our artistic work, right? And we can do that because of our lived experience of disability. There's something that we have that we need to share, that people need from us. We can introduce them to parts of themselves they didn't know they were missing. So that's it. So I wanted to just leave a few minutes at the end of this hour to answer any questions or to respond to other thoughts you might have, or yeah. So yes, we have a bit of time now. If you have anything that you're wondering about, anything that I brought up, curious about, um, if you want to share an experience that you have that's similar, or yeah, yeah, Ted.
Sorry. Yeah, I just had a question. Actually, I had a couple of questions, but one was, first of all, when you said you first got involved in theater school, uh, there was no such place there for people with disabilities, and I wondered if that's changed at all. Whether the schools now think of it as a broader context of humanity, so that we can see people's stories. Um, and so that was one question. But then another question I also have is about narrative. And
Ah,
I, not being a performer, but asking you as a performer, you deal with an audience that is right there while you're performing. And I wondered whether sometimes you have an open-ended narrative that somehow relates to the people who are there as your audience.
oh, that's really interesting. Um, okay, so I'll address the first question, I know that at U of W, because they've reached out to me about, how can we support our students with disabilities. So I know that there are students with disabilities in the theater program at U of W. I know of a couple of graduates from the school I went to in Montreal. One graduate who is physically disabled, was born with one leg. So he went through the program there and graduated. But I also know that a lot of disabled theater artists express frustration with their training institutions not providing accommodations. So they'll admit these students, but then they fail to provide accommodations that or
I guess
address their access needs.
do they fail to really understand the possibilities? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
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 And then your question about open-ended narrative. It's really interesting, like I some forms of theater, like more I did a dance show at Winnipeg Contemporary Dancers, and of course with dance, the audience is always creating their own narrative. You have your narrative in your head of what story you're telling, but because you're not using words, or you're using words in such a poetic kind of form, that then the narrative is not clearly stated, as it is in a play where there's a set and scenes that happen in relationships. But there's a narrative, and it is quite open-ended, so that the audience is forming their own narrative in dance. But not so much, I mean, I guess in theater that happens as well. We form our own narrative about what the story was about, the play was about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would guess too that maybe you do respond to people watching you and listening to you, and so in some ways the way you present your narrative is also influenced by the response you're getting from the people who are watching and listening to you.
Yeah.
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 True.
Carly has their hand up. Did you want to ask a question, Carly?
Yes, I was wondering about any, excuse me, publishers, like for stories or books, since I'm currently working on writing like a memoir
Oh,
style and a few different things.
cool. I don't know. I bet Diane would have more answers for that. I don't, I've published plays, so I've only worked with, Playwrights Canada Press, like theater book publishers. So I don't really know.
Okay.
Diane, do you have thoughts?
Well, in Canada, there are only so many publishers, and a lot of them have been going out of business. Like Inanna Publications, which was the only women's press in Canada. And so it's really competitive to get your memoir published by a publisher right now. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to send it. But I love self-publishing, and you can get help with that from Print Pro, and also from Friesens. Of course, you would need to fund that, or funds to do that if you are doing it on your own. But you can send it to folks, to publishers, but I know it's very, very competitive right now for anybody who wants to get memoir published. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, it's difficult when you're on disability, and in New Brunswick, it's known as the lowest disability rates in Canada, as the information the NBCPD,
Exactly.
the Coalition for Persons with
Yeah.
work with.
No, I know. Yes. I know that one of our members at AANM published his own series of reflections and poetry and memoir. And he's I don't know, he self-published that and he launched that at our group. So maybe ask Janelle, our executive director, like maybe he has some ideas about how he did that. Because I think he also is not employed right now, right, as a person with disability. And so he found a way to do that. I don't know how he did that.
Thank you, Diane. Brennan
Well,
has the hand up, and that's going to be our last comment of the evening.
Firstly, thank you so much. I feel like when I hear you speak every time, I go away and think about what you said for days and days and days. So I'm sure that I'll be driving to work and thinking of what you've been talking about, and having my coffee break and doing the same. So thank you so much. But my question is, since becoming an artist with a disability, have you found that the audiences that you're performing in front of, do they have a response that's different or the same to audiences that you experienced before that? I know that there's learning that's happening in a different way, or different type of learning that's happening through your performances. So I'm wondering if you notice any differences or similarities.
Oh, that's really interesting. I haven't noticed any differences. No, I haven't noticed any differences. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't. I know I was in Stratford. I was part of the acting company at Stratford last year in 23. And I know a number of people thought that I was an able-bodied actor in a wheelchair because they had never seen a wheelchair user on that stage before. That was the first one. So I know people were surprised to see me actually in a wheelchair when I was, outside of the theater. People who had seen shows. But that's the only thing I can think of. Yeah.
I know we said that was the last comment, but Diane, I see you have your
Yeah.
hand up.
I just need to plug the current Sick and Twisted show, the Panto, which I saw yesterday and enjoyed immensely. Debbie, tell us how many performances are left and how folks can catch it.
Sure.
It's worthwhile. It's good.
There are 4 shows left, Thursday to Sunday. Sunday is almost sold out. It's at 3 o'clock, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday is at 7 o'clock at night. It's an hour and 15 minutes long. It's at Prairie Theatre Exchange in the small theater. You can get tickets online through Sick and Twisted's website, sickandtwisted.ca. And the tickets are in a sliding scale, so there are free tickets, and the regular price is $20, but then there are like $5 increments down to free. So if you need free tickets, please use them. If you want to pay extra, there's a $30 ticket if you feel like it. Some people want to pay extra, but yeah, you can use the cheap tickets if you want. Yeah. And it's a fun show. It's a family show. It's a good show for kids if you have kids in your life. There's a lot of audience participation just in terms of calling back to the audience, to the performers. You have to boo the bad guy. You have to say "aw" when someone's having a hard time. And there's candy at the end.
Thank you, Debbie, so much for this talk. You have this combination of gentleness and fierceness that makes the world a much more beautiful place. And thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you all for joining us tonight. And I hope you have a good evening.
Thanks.
You too.